we're recording this on Martin Luther King Day. And as you mentioned, Dave, like the NFL likes to pay great lip service to the idea that that the way they operate would somehow fall in line with what Martin Luther King taught us in his life and in his death. And so for you, like, what message do you have for people who we know are going to do this today? NFL owners, conservative politicians who cannot wait. They have their thumbs perched above their phone keyboard to quote Martin Luther King out of context. What message do you have for them today?
Well, I mean, I guess the first thing I would say is actually read some King, because so many people are just going to, quote Martin Luther King based on, quick Google searches and not the actuality of what he thought and believed. But particularly, though, to people in the sports world, what I would stress is that understand that Martin Luther King was a sports fan, and he saw sports as a legitimate place to express dissent. He was not a shut up and dribble guy. He supported Jackie Robinson's right to be political in the 1950s when people said that the retired Robinson had no place in the civil rights movement. He called Jackie Robinson a sit-inner before sit-ins and a freedom rider before freedom rides. In 1968, and this was huge, he supported the Olympic Project for Human Rights. Before his assassination, he supported their right to boycott the Olympics if it meant fighting for civil rights and human rights, both in the United States and around the globe. And that was a big deal because people of King's generation, Black leaders, were deeply critical of the Tommie Smiths, John Carloses, and Dr. Harry Edwards of the time. And then so here was Dr. King saying, well, actually, I think they're doing the right thing given the amount of tumult that exists in the world. And King also understood the symbolic importance of athletes, of Black athletes who were proud and fearless. His favorite athlete was Bob Gibson. And I think that says something in and of itself, that his number one fave was Bob Gibson, somebody who didn't take any guff from anybody and was willing to throw that ball right by your ear if you dared give him a dirty look from the batter's box. And so for someone who was never much of an athlete himself, I mean, King once joked, he said, the only thing I can play is pool. He did understand that sports was a legitimate site of dissent. And I think that's what I would want people to know today. All the shut up and dribble people got to know that the athletes who speak out on politics are actually standing and walking in the tradition of Dr. King.
Well, absolutely. And one of the things that, gets lost about Dr. King, think about his relationship with Muhammad Ali. When Muhammad Ali comes out as a member of the Nation of Islam, and Dr. King is really critical of him. But within 3 years, when Muhammad Ali also comes out as a staunch opponent of the war in Vietnam, they become allies, right? And so, and what it shows you is how plugged in Dr. King was to the sports world and to the power of athletes to command attention and to move the needle on these issues. And Meghan, since you're a resident NBA expert, like, what do you think of how the NBA uses Dr. King's holiday, not just to promote themselves, which they do because it's a day off of work and they're on TV in the daytime, but also to advance his message and his legacy?
I think it's something that they've consistently been doing, and they've made sure that they don't miss the mark on it, that they understand what he meant to sports and what sports meant to him, to Dave's point. And you look at what has transpired over the last couple of years, especially in the last 4.5 years of this administration, as they're on their way out on Wednesday, they have not shut up and dribbled. They have not stuck to sports. They have continuously utilized their voices. They've continuously utilized their platforms. And as Dave said, they have done what I think personally would have been exactly what the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would have wanted, is to walk in their footsteps and not allow people to tell them what to do and to stand up for what they want. And that's simply equality. And I think they've done a great job of continuing his legacy and trying to make him proud. And I think he is looking down on them, along with many others who are happy that they continue to not shut up and dribble and get into, as they would say, good trouble. And if I can, his daughter Bernice actually tweeted at 3:00 this morning, and she said this, and I quote, "Please don't act like everyone loved my father. He was assassinated. A 1967 poll reflected that he was one of the most hated men in America. Most hated. Many who quote him now and evoke him to deter justice today would likely hate and may already hate the authentic king. And I end quote. So if there's any pundits or people who don't like what has been happening with the sports world as of late in the last couple of years, if there's anything I can say and any advice I can give you, don't hit tweet. Do not hit send. Do not try to reiterate and requote something that Dr. King has said, because you are probably part of the group who in that 1967 poll would say that he is the most hated man in America.
Well, absolutely. And like my message to the people who, even if I tell them not to quote Dr. King out of context, they're going to quote him out of context anyway, just because that's what people are so conditioned to do. But think about the context. Like the way Dr. King gets presented now is as a man of peace, which he was, but he also was a fighter. Like there are different ways to fight, right? And I'm reading right now Why We Can't Wait, and it's about the fight against Jim Crow segregation in Birmingham. And so they took a pledge to react nonviolently. Didn't mean they weren't fighting. And also, and this to me is critically important, because a lot of these quotes, the big Dr. King quotes that get resurfaced and circulated and recycled are the ones that are colorblind. Judge me by the content of my character, not by the color of my skin, but of the content of my character, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they lose the very essence of who he was and what he did. Like the whole "I Have a Dream" speech, you listen to that speech, and the biggest theme of that speech is America's promissory note to the Negro that's going to come back insufficient funds, right? What America owes Black people specifically. He's not saying let's all be colorblind. He's saying America owes us this debt because of everything we have done to build this country. And you think about, short quote from the last speech of Dr. King's life, when he was in Memphis fighting for the rights of Black sanitation workers who were on strike. And what he says in his last speech is, the American Negro collectively is richer than most nations of the world. That's power right there if we know how to pool it. So this is Dr. King, who is often portrayed as this meek, humble, deferential guy who's just going to wait for white people to bestow justice on him, is saying, no, we need to get together and we need to fight for justice because we have power. So when I look at, the athlete activism movements, like the ones that we've seen that have made the most headlines and a lot of progress are the ones where you have Black athletes recognizing that if they leverage their economic power, they can make things happen. Like the University of Missouri in 2015, when they wanted to get rid of the racist president and the school wasn't moving to do it. So the Black football players said, we are not going to play. You guys have this game against BYU. Good luck. We're not playing. And see if you can have this game without Black people. If Black people don't participate, there is no game. If there is no game, there is no paycheck. See how you like that. And the important and the thing, and the reason I bring that incident, that movement up specifically, because it was also an example of Black athletes on a college campus who often are divided from rank and file Black students by their privilege, using their privilege to help rank and file Black students instead of using their privilege to help the coach get richer. But all of this is absolutely in line with what Martin Luther King was talking about, what Martin Luther King fought for throughout his life and career, but definitely what he was referencing in the last speech of his life. So before you quote Dr. King out of context, and I would hope bringing in viewers and listeners aren't about to do that, but before you do, go listen to "I Have a Dream" from top to bottom. Go listen to the last speech of Dr. King's life from top to bottom. Skip over that Chrysler commercial where it shows Dr. King speaking and the guy helping the dude with the Ram 150, because when Dr. King spoke of service, he was not talking about your ability to buy a Chrysler or to make Chrysler richer. But listen to "I Have a Dream" top to bottom. Listen to his final speech top to bottom and really get a sense of who he was and what he was fighting for and who he was fighting for. Because I promise you, it was the two things that it was not were passive and colorblind.